Well, huge weekend, 5 points and very close games again. We talked about it. You guys seem to love these 1-0 games, but you found some wins in them recently. So how do you feel about your team getting a couple close wins again this weekend, including pulling another one out in overtime there?
I'm going to correct you. I don't know if I love the 1-goal games. We talked about that this morning, off it. But, I think it just shows the parity, right, in the league. Michigan Tech, unbelievable team, well coached. Weekend before, Mankato, McNaughton Cup champs again. I forget how many they've won in the last decade. I read a lot about it. The weekend before that, Augustana ranked 14th in the country, 1-goal games, right? Like we're there with them. I think there's, a lot of parity in it. And when you get into these best of threes, they're tough. And in a best of 7, majority, the best team wins always too, right? Like often, but best of 3s or single game eliminations, you see it in all the NCAA basketball tournaments. Like it just takes, a little bit of luck, a little bit of good fortune, off it. But it's gonna be a great series. They're a good hockey club. It's a good battle this weekend. Kind of different that we have to head back up there and play them, right again. But we'll help with our pre-scouts. We know them well. They know us well, obviously, off it. And we played them last year in the playoffs, which were tight games. And I just expect probably what you saw this past weekend. One-goal hockey games would be my prediction.
Puck management team's been working on improving that as the season has gone along. Did that really help you kind of control some of the games, some of the game action that we saw this past weekend?
Yeah, like we always want to try to dictate the play, and dictate where the puck goes. But again, we found ourselves in our zone chasing the puck too much. And what happens when you chase the puck, this is a real credit to Michigan Tech. Their D are very active. They get rolling. They get guys high. They get, us turning into a bit of a man-on-man, which then takes a lot of communication and sorting out. By the time you get the puck back, you're tired. So what we'd end up doing is getting to the red line, having to deposit the puck, get a line change, and then they would have possession. They would have coming back out with it. So we have to do a better job in our zone of stopping them at the gates, we call it, and killing them into a quadrant of the ice and not let them get into that man-on-man coverage that we have to play or get rolling. So they play, a little bit of a different style. And I always say I admire that too, because it's, every team has a different identity. And that's what's great about hockey, and it's great about your personnel. It's great about coaches. Everyone has a different philosophy off it. And I always say neither philosophy is right or wrong. It's can you get your team to play within the way you want to play. And I think both teams, play a lot in similarity, but also some differences. And it's going to come down to the team that can stick to their own identity the best.
Your first time up there in Houghton, what were your thoughts about the crowd in particular and what challenges that arena in and of itself presents for the opposition this weekend? Of course, it's you guys again.
Well, yeah, it's unfortunate. They're on spring break, too. So their students weren't in last weekend. I don't know if they'll be in this weekend, right? Because it starts Monday, so maybe they get some back early. But what a neat rink. I think it'll be my first time up there. They steep, loud. Reminds us a lot of the Slater, when it's full right off it. Like it's a great venue, whether you're playing at home or away up there. Like that's really what you want. You want, whether, we want to be at home, but if not, you want to go to a venue where, you're kind of known as, the evil empire coming in. Everyone's out to get you, right? And so it's fun. Like when they're on you and chanting and there's life to the building. It excites our guys. Off it, and it's unfortunate. We were hoping we could make it back here for the playoffs, and it is what it is. 2 points from 1 to 5, first to fifth, and we're right there, and it comes down to some tiebreakers, right? And that's the way it happens. So we can't sit here and live in the shoulda, coulda, woulda. We just got to move on, build off this past weekend, stay confident, and know that, we went up there. That's going to be a tall task again to do what we did, but we can do it. And the fact that we've been able to go up there and believe in our process and get those wins should help build some confidence for our group.
Yeah, just looking at the playoff field, I know you talked a little bit there about the parity of the conference, with 5 teams being within 2 points of the top spot. Just, I guess, broadly speaking on that playoff picture, I guess your thoughts necessarily on the, how wide open the field can be perceived just by, you look at those top 5 teams right there neck and neck all year long, and then now heading into the playoffs where if you look at it from an observer's perspective, maybe not a real clear favorite among the group.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Like, I think, what's great about the CCHA this year, I think any team in the playoff has an opportunity. Like in a best of 3, anything can happen. Then single game, off of that. And obviously, we talk about the teams in the top 5 right now, but Bemidji's right there as well. That's a team that, they just played St. Thomas on the weekend, won on Friday and lost in a shootout Saturday, off them. And St. Thomas is a nationally ranked team as well, and we all know what type of team they're like too. They got coaching, and there's not one team where when you sit here and you go, man, I'm glad we pulled that team. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I think for us, it's the biggest thing is we would love to have not, have to travel back-to-back weekends, but then again, I'm okay if we have to travel back-to-back weekends and we add more games to the schedule. I mean, like, that's my whole thing, and it's hockey time. We're on borrowed time. As I said to our group, we're in playoffs are borrowed time. Now we have to earn it even more. Like, we have a set schedule for the year. We play our 36 games. That's in there, right? But once we get to playoffs, now we're borrowing time. So now if we want to borrow more, we have to perform. We have to execute. We have to go up there and replicate what we just did and come home with 2 wins. And like I said, that's a lot easier said than done too, because again, that's a team all year that has beat a lot of good opponents. Both games were 1-goal games up there, and they could easily have gone the other way. But I do like the fact that we got up there. We got a taste of winning up there, and that's not going to guarantee this weekend, but it's nice to have that instead of chasing it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess just speaking in terms of that, it's kind of a unique situation where you do have the regular season kind of bleed into the first round of the playoffs with a similar opponent. I know you mentioned there, having those 2 wins under your belt. I guess, just hearing that it's something that you all, kind of look to build off of. I know some coaches kind of speak of like, regular season's that, now it's the playoffs, and kind of compartmentalize one side and then, new slate in the other. But, with the momentum you've built over those last 2 games seems to be something that you guys are looking to, I guess, build off of, or know
Correct.
that you've seen the track record that you can do that there.
Yeah, exactly. And it is a whole different season, as you alluded to there, right? Like, playoffs is a whole different beast in itself than the regular season. But you do want to make sure, you're trying to peak at the right time. I've said that since day one here back in October. We lost our first 2 games to Niagara. We lost to Robert Morris in the exhibition. We went through some highs and lows. I was never concerned. Like, the season is about, I was saying, making sure you're playing at your optimal level as playoffs start to come, often. And even then, like I always say, that doesn't guarantee you're going to win, but it gives you a good chance. So I've been on a lot of teams where we started strong, we finished poor, or we started strong, had a lull in the middle, finished strong. So for us, it's always gradually about, where are we from games 1 and 2 to games 35 and 36. I think when I reflect on the regular season, we're a much better team than we were back in October. I think we started there. So, right. So, for me, that is the true, evaluation of our group. Obviously we play to finish in the top 4 and to win the McNaughton Cup, often, but at the end of the day, we fell a little short, and that's going to happen, and as I was talking to my wife about it, everything happens for a reason. We were meant to go up here and play. We were meant to go up here and play these guys again. And no matter what, if we wanted to get to where we want to go, we'd have to beat all these teams anyways. So it just, we have to play them a little bit earlier. And on the flip side, I'm sure they're looking at it thinking, man, if we could have got to first or second, they had the chance to, right? But we can't live like that. We're a good opponent. They're a good opponent. It's hard enough to beat a team twice in a weekend. Now the next challenge is we got to do it again, right? Off it. So it's going to be some really good hockey. I'm looking forward to it.
You mentioned there the necessity of peaking at the right time throughout the course of the season. Is there something that you see as kind of like a science to that, or the method of getting to that point? I guess some of the things that might go into getting a team to where they're really rolling there at the end.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, like, to understand that we play to a standard all year, an expectation. So when you look at games, we've lost some games that we played really well and should have won. We won games where we didn't play very well, but we don't really look at it as a byproduct. We want to look at it as a standard, and we want to play to a certain identity each and every night. And if you looked at our guys during the year and talked to them after games, there's games we won, but they know we could have been better. It's great we found a way, but we don't play to the score. We play to an expectation. And if you look at our room, we have the word standard above the National Hockey League logo and all our NHL alumni, because that's the standard. You play like a pro. You take care of yourself like a pro. If you want to play in the National Hockey League, that's the standard, day in and day out, the habits, the details. And our group has done a really good job of, just staying in the now. Like, they don't get too high, they don't get too low. Good question to ask them is, do they love winning or hate losing? What do they like more? Like, what do they love winning or do they hate losing? I think our group, I think they hate to lose. And that's a competitive environment out of them. And we all love winning because that's the fun part at the end of the game. But like, what feeling, is something you don't like. To me, I'm a hate to lose guy. I hate that feeling after. But someone's like, well, you don't love winning? Well, we do love winning, but that feeling of hating to lose, of the letdown from a coach's standpoint, because our job as coaches is to deliver and get our players prepared to be at their optimal level this time of year. So for me, the pressure's on us. That's why we signed up for this job as coaches. Our pressure is to make sure our players have all the resources, they don't have any excuses, we prep them right, they rest right, they eat right, and we get out there and we do the best we can. And that's the joy of sports. But the other good joy of sports, you can do all that and still fall on the wrong side of it, right? And you could play the whole bingo card correctly, off it, and still someone beat you to bingo. I don't know. It's one of those where it's going to be a tight game. I love where our team's at, our leadership. We're a confident group, and we're not past that. We also respect our opponent and know there's a lot of heavy lifting to be done this weekend.
And then, you all, as you talked a little bit about earlier, won in the first round last year, advanced past the quarterfinals. Looking to, I guess, build off that going into this year, I guess, is there anything that you might take away, some experiences or things that the group might have to lean on, knowing that was accomplished last year, going into it again this time around?
Well, I don't know if it's anything we, really vet to, because we have half a new team. But what we do look at is, how did we end up last weekend? Like, we went into that third period down a goal. So we challenged the guys about winning the first 10 minutes. We knew if we won the game in regulation, how things might fall out. We also we didn't know how all the other games were going, right? So there's a lot of different kind of parameters in it, right? But we challenged to win the second 10, and we played pretty good. In the second, we probably had some really good opportunities late in that game to win that. And when we won in overtime, that's tough to go up there and get 5 of 6. So we look at that as we played a lot of games this year that we've won in a lot of different kinds of ways. Coming from behind, up 2 goals, tied, win again, win by, we won 9-5 or something. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many. So for us, it allows us to fall back on, our trials during the year to relate back to those, and hopefully that pays dividends to us moving forward, because, we've had some games that have slipped. The one thing with our group, we don't have any panic. There's no panic. We're down a goal, great. We're down 2, great. Let's play. It's a long game. We've been up 2, against Mankato, right? We're up 3-1, and next thing you know, it's 4-3. Like that's a tough one to come back for. We tied it up 4-4. They scored with a couple minutes left, unfortunately. But the hard part is learning how to continue to play with 2-goal leads. Hardest lead in hockey. You want to get the third one to create your separation. If not, it's back to a 1 goal, right? So, but I like our group. I think last year our returners have gone through a lot. I think our seniors over the last 3 years have gone through a lot that will play dividends. Again, to us moving, their experiences is so invaluable to me. For their 3 years here, and they're going to be the ones to lead the way. And I've challenged them that this is the group that has to be, bought in on ice, off ice, day in and day out right now, because we're playing for those seniors. Because their hourglass is tilt over, So our job is keep putting sand in it, off it. So they're going to lead the way. We're going to follow their lead, and I know they're going to be prepared and going to do a great job for us.